Hey there everybody, welcome to the channel and welcome to the first time lapse of the first build on Pandemia. So for this one I wanted to build a village, and I thought it'd be fitting to kind of just replicate sort of a normal plains village from vanilla Minecraft. So this village is located on the spawn island, you can actually see it from the spawn, and I thought it'd be important to kind of give new players a place to go that is relatively safe, where they can maybe find a few useful materials and just kind of start their playthrough in a familiar, cozy, and nice spot. So after laying out the village as you saw me do, I decided to start on the church here, and I think it's important to start with kind of the focal point build, or the largest build in any village or sort of conglomerate of buildings, because it just kind of helps set the scale for the rest of the builds. It helps set the style a little bit, although this church is pretty different from the rest of the builds. I wanted to just get this out of the way first and then kind of build the rest of the village around it, since again a lot of the kind of sight lines and roads lead to the church. I kind of view this as, you know, the most important building in the village, and so I just wanted to make sure I knew what that was going to look like first and understand the proportions of that. So this tower here I wasn't quite happy with when I first built it. It was a little too small, so I decided to expand it a little bit and move it around. This is kind of the best use of a world edit that I can think of, is to basically just have the freedom to easily and effortlessly expand or contract or move certain builds around. It just really gives the freedom of, you know, kind of making those decisions that otherwise you might just not make because it's such a pain to do. So this next structure is a blacksmith, and this one took me a little while, mainly just because I was kind of trying to figure out what the style for these smaller buildings was going to be, and figuring out the color palette and the way the roofs were going to be set up. And you'll see that throughout the rest of the builds here, I took a lot of design cues from this initial building. So I didn't want the village to be too large, and I wanted to be really careful about the type of buildings that I include. So this next one is an inn, and I figured that a village of this size, you know, maybe they get a lot of travelers, and so a small inn would make sense. It also kind of functions as sort of a restaurant and bar, so some of the villagers can come and get food and stuff like that. And I think this is a good complement to the blacksmith. It's situated more or less at the entrance, or one of the main entrances to the town, so I think that positioning makes sense. And again, I'm just kind of taking some of the design cues from the blacksmith into the roof and design of the inn. So after that, I figured that a farm kind of butted up against this little hill area might be nice. Makes sense, and functionally too, it gives players, you know, a source of wheat and some other materials for that early game grind. I personally always, you know, struggle with getting food early on, and so I think that as you'll see here, a nice big wheat field is a good way to get started. And I really like the way that the farm kind of rests in the village. I think it's a little bit removed from the town center, which makes sense, but it's also close enough that it doesn't feel sort of like a tangential, like rural area. I think that although, you know, this is not the most realistic village in terms of layout and stuff like that, I think that it has the right feel. And again, I'm really going for sort of a functional village here, just keeping in mind that this is probably the first place that new players are going to visit. And it should have, you know, not too much to get them started, but enough to where they can get a comfortable start and kind of get away from some of those early game grindy things. So moving down and towards the city center here, I wanted to add a few more small buildings, kind of just to function as smaller homes and things like that. And I really struggled, honestly, with some of these diagonal builds. I haven't really done much diagonal building. And so these, you know, as you're watching them be built and they're already done, you know, it seems quick on the screen, but believe me, it took quite a while to figure out how to do these roofs and everything. But I'm relatively happy with the way they turned out. I think that adding diagonal builds to any village just kind of spices it up a little bit. When you have things all in 90-degree angles, that can get a little boring. So I think just having those shapes in the village kind of serves its purpose. The interiors are a little funky, but what are you gonna do? So just kind of finishing up the last little house here, I wanted to just do something relatively basic again. On the 90-degree angle, I think that those two angled builds kind of get the job done as far as angled or non-straight building. And that's all of the major structures in the village. So next up, I wanted to build the bridges that lead in. I think it's nice how this village is kind of nestled in between all these rivers. It kind of frames it in well, and it gives an opportunity to kind of control the entrances and exits. And bridge building is something that I've kind of struggled with in the past, but I'm pretty happy with the way these turned out. Again, you can't really tell because of how fast the time-lapse is, but there's a lot of different kind of changes and iterations here, and I'm using World Edit a little bit to move things around, which is very convenient. I'm really happy with the way that this final bridge turned out too. I wanted to do something slightly different than the other two because this one's sort of a more interior bridge, and it also leads over to the church, so it seemed like it should have a slightly different style that sort of transitions from the more wood type palettes to the actual more stone church. And here I am just kind of making the paths. I used some red wool to mark them out, and then I created sort of a clipboard palette of the blocks I wanted to use for the path and just overlaid that over it. Again, another little World Edit thing that just makes building a lot easier and kind of helps build stuff that should be random. And so for kind of the final decorative touch here, I wanted to initially build a well in the center of the town, but I decided to go for a custom tree instead. It just seemed like color palette wise, it made more sense, and it kind of just made the village feel a little more cozy, and maybe, it started as someone building a cottage around this tree and kind of grew from there. And I just really like custom trees. I think that they're a really cozy feature, and kind of hanging lights from them is just, I've always liked it, so I wanted to include it. And that's pretty much it. I went around and did some final detailing and put some glass in the windows and just, kind of touched some things up. And then off camera, I actually went and did all of the interiors. So this village is now in the current version of Pandemia, so you can download it at the link in the description and explore. There's a lot to see here, and there are villagers, and there are items in some of the chests, and it's going to be an interesting place, and I'm curious what you guys think about it, and I hope that you enjoy exploring it as much as I enjoy making it. One final thing I did want to note is that whenever I release sort of a new version of the map like this, there will be at least one structure that I don't include in the time-lapse that's sort of a secret or hidden thing. And this video is no exception. There is something relatively close to this village that I have not shown on camera, and I'm looking forward to you guys discovering it. So that's the village, guys. I hope you enjoyed the time-lapse. There'll be a lot more of these coming, and I hope you enjoy exploring this on Pandemia.